Welcome to the RJLT Economics. In this podcast, I want to discuss the economic disaster that Great Britain is facing and the situation that Liz Truss must deal with. I want to develop today's podcast in 3 steps. First, I want to make the argument that Liz Truss is not responsible for the economic woes that Britain is facing. Secondly, I want to speculate a bit on who is behind the push to frame Liz Truss for the fall guy, or the fall woman, let's say. And lastly, I want to argue, very simply, that Liz Truss is indeed incompetent, but in a different way than people are arguing today. So let's start with the first step, and I think this is the most important aspect of this recording. I made some very brief notes. I just very quickly identified 6 elements that have driven Britain to its current economic situation. Namely, that the pound is falling, that inflation is rising continually and reaching a level that hasn't been seen perhaps for, half a century. And this is at peacetime, right? The last time perhaps it was in the aftermath of World War II. That was when Britain experienced some inflation problems. Nevertheless, I've identified these six drivers. First, and this is quite important, is that the British pound is no longer a reserve currency. And in fact, it lost its reserve currency status after Britain went bankrupt in the aftermath of the war. But the effects has been felt and is being felt, and it is really just an example of how people will say, you know what people say, that when an empire falls, it's basically slowly at first, then all of a sudden. I think the fall of the British pound is a reflection of the the end of its reserve status, right? It's just really a repercussion of it. And the second driver is that Britain has no gold. I think Britain has sold its gold over the decades, and the last time I think was Gordon Brown who sold the last bits of Britain's gold. So currently Britain is in a completely fully fiat, completely naked situation when it comes to its currency, right? A lot of the European countries actually have a lot of gold. Italy, France, Germany, they all have a lot of gold in their reserve. That means that, let's say one day the euro really falls, these countries have means to basically provide some credibility to the fiat currency that they will be using in the aftermath of the collapse of the euro. But Britain has no gold, and Britain has very little foreign currency reserves. That means that the pound is really only purely based on confidence. And once the confidence is gone, it's not coming back. The third driver is that Britain has a diminished stature in the global stage. And there's was because, of course, Britain lost its empire. It was the Suez Crisis really marked the complete end of its empire, and most of its colonies went independent. And finally, the final nail in the coffin, just last month, I think it was last month, their queen died. She passed away, and all that was there to remind people of the past glories of the British Empire, of the British stature, were gone. And this is quite important an issue, even though it's all purely symbolic. It's very important to the psychology of the markets, and a large part of finance is psychology, is confidence. And with Britain having a continually diminished stature, I think that also causes a loss of confidence in the viability of the British economy and in the British pound. The fourth driver was the industrialization. We know that Britain used to be the number one industrial power, although that was a long time ago. It has since been taken over by Germany and then the United States. I think now China even. So that and in Britain has in fact gone reverse. It's fully deindustrialized. Britain has used to be one of the largest steel producers. Now it hardly produces any steel. Britain used to be the largest exporter of automobiles. Now it doesn't. There is not a single British car manufacturer that is owned by anyone that is British. And even then, there used to be just a few years ago, before Brexit, some automobile manufacturing in Britain. But now a lot of the companies have left, and I think they will continue to leave simply because it is not very cost effective to operate in Britain. So without any tangible or a lot of a sizable, let's say, industrial output, the British economy is purely based on services. And that is never a really solid foundation for for the prosperity of a large nation, right? And just to add on to it, since Britain really participated in the sanctions against the Russian people, notably the Russian oligarchs, in the aftermath or after the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, a lot of the confidence in the independence and in the independence of the British financial system, in the in the rule of law, in the sanctity of private properties in Britain, these things basically, these confidence, these trust have been lost, and that means that people, rich people from countries that are not really considered Western, need to think twice before putting their money in a financial system such as that of Britain. So after the industrialization, Britain has also undermined its financial service sector. So that's another driver. The fifth driver is that it's because of modern monetary theory that Britain has had too long been printing money. Britain and the Brits are heavily indebted, and this really obviously whatever that you owe, you have to pay back in one way, one form or another. You have to pay back. So now is really just the time of them paying back their debt, and in a way that is not very orderly. The sixth factor is supply chain issues. This is basically because of the virus and then the war. That means basically Britain has difficulty accessing a lot of the energies, raw materials, and also industrial outputs that they, and even input and output. Anything that needs to come from abroad, Britain has either less easy access to or more costly access to. That all these has decreased the competitiveness of the British economy. So all these 6 factors are, I think, the main drivers of the fall of the British pound. And we can see very clearly that Liz Truss is not responsible for any of these. Liz Truss is just an unfortunate politician who is drunk on power, but who is clueless as to wanting to become prime minister at this stage. And this leads us to the second part. Why was Liz Truss pushed to become the prime minister? Obviously, we knew, if anyone paid much attention, the tabloids in Britain really wanted, I think they wanted, in the beginning, the other woman, I don't quite recall her name. I think her name starts with M, as more whatever. They wanted that woman, but then very quickly they switched to Liz Truss. I think there are some people behind it, and I think really this perhaps the person behind it was Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson, don't underestimate the person, that guy. The guy is indeed quite charismatic, and I think he is deeply entrenched in the British political system. So I think what really might have happened was that support for him was waning, and he made a lot of difficult, bad mistakes, a lot of, unforced errors. And a lot of British people were calling for his resignation. So what could he do? Well, he resigns, but he makes sure that a completely incompetent person succeeds him. And then the British people will experience buyer's remorse. And at this point, Boris Johnson will come out. And basically, again, actually, he doesn't come out, but in the background, he will push for Liz Truss to be removed. And unsurprisingly now, the Conservative Party members and the Brits want him to become prime minister again. And so just with a month or two hiatus, he may very well by this time next month, be prime minister again. So I think it's quite possible that he is actually the one behind it. I listen to the Duran, which is a channel that you can find on YouTube, and Rockfin, and they've made some speculations. They say that perhaps that the Bank of England was behind it. I disagree. I don't think the Bank of England is in any position to really manipulate his currency just to get rid of a politician. I don't really think so. I think they were really worried, and Britain Britain's economy was really on the brink, and it has very little to do with Liz Truss. Boris Johnson was really out at a very optimal time, because he left right before the Queen died. He left right before the collapse of the British pound, and if he comes back, and when he comes back, he will be able to blame Liz Truss for all his failures and all the troubles that the Brits will experience this winter, and the continued collapse of the British pound that we will see next year will all be blamed on Liz Truss and her Chancellor. So this would basically be very good for Boris Johnson, right? And the final point I want to make, this is step 3. Indeed, I say that Liz Truss is incompetent, but she is not incompetent in that her policies collapsed the British pound, or that her policies or her policy proposals collapsed the British economy. Rather, she is incompetent because she raced to become prime minister at the worst time, when people who are wise enough don't even want to try. I don't think Michael Gove, the very wily person, very conniving person, even tried to become the prime minister. She did, and this was basically how to say. Well, I wanted to come up with an analogy but I think nothing suitable. Anyway, just very that was quite foolish of her. And after she became prime minister, she is so incompetent, and that she is blind to the fact that someone has been plotting behind her back, and someone wants her head, and someone wants her to be the sacrificial lamb. Someone wants her to be blamed for all the problems that they created. She is completely ignorant to these facts. Well, I guess that's all I have to say today. Thank you very much for listening. Just obviously, just to repeat, this podcast can also be found on Odyssey and Rumble, and I have Twitter and what is the other one? Telegram. Sorry, Twitter and Telegram. So I will put the link in the description below. Thank you very much and have a great day.